Okay, hear me out. We need to stop this. All of the games we've gotten in the last couple years or so, there have been chart-taking entries, some just hanging on, and everything in between, but along with the usual flow of things, a new trend has arisen. Putting a date at the end of the title. This terrible trend has brought the end of a decently large amount of games, but even more money. Now, although the year at the end of the title isn't the only reason that several games have died or flopped, it's a pretty good indicator that one will. So, super roundabout intro, I know, we'll be talking about one of these games, Cyberpunk 2077. Arguably the lead role in this nightmare of fails and flop-ings, Cyberpunk was a really big blast of sadness. It had been hyped up for years. I mean, guys, I'm talking back when I was like a kid, that's how far. So the fact that Cyberpunk didn't fulfill the hype cuts deep. So can we just stop this trend? I mean, like, why even 2077? It's not like we're gonna be there when we get to 77, I mean, my god. But at this rate, we'll never make it to 1 million subscribers, which is the real problem. So politely, invite the subscribe button to a pillow fight, but secretly fill your pillow up with rocks. But why? Why did it die? It wasn't entirely the year at the end of the title, but there's gotta be something else. So in this video, I hope to answer just that. What happened to Cyberpunk 2077? So, really quickly before we jump into the video, we need to go over the situation. What's happened? I know that some of you might already know the deal, but I still recommend you hear me out. Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that's been hyped up for many years. Though it's also been delayed many times, we've seen trailers and announcements dating all the way back to 2012, and it was even in the working before that. The team working on Cyberpunk, CD Projekt Red, was as excited and as passionate for the game as we were. So Cyberpunk was going to be a big game, and finally, past all the delays and bumps in the road, we got it. But it was a mess. The quality of the game was pre-alpha, and the game in general was unpolished and made several easily avoidable mistakes. The world, which was promised and hyped up to be a full-of-life city, was an empty and kind of boring urban environment. The company has apologized for the game and said they'll be trying to redeem it, and while many of their attempts at fixing the game were and are successful, the damage has already been done. And after doing a fairly small amount of digging, the reason Cyberpunk died isn't any big mystery. It was almost doomed from the beginning. So now that you're all caught up, let's jump back in. All the way back in 2012, CD Projekt Red released the first trailer for the game. Everybody was excited to see what this crazy cool looking game would turn out to be, but we didn't get a release date until much later. Now, a couple words on CD Projekt Red. They could have just as easily showed a trailer of an elephant taking a dump, and everyone would still get just as excited because this company has a great roster of video games. Most commonly and almost exclusively known for the Witcher series, and several other smaller games centered around that same world. Now, a couple words on the Witcher series. They're amazing games. Though you can't have kids around while you play them, it's an amazing bunch. And a word on these smaller, more like spin-offs. They're amazing too. The Thronebreaker Witcher game is an amazing, simply visually creative and stunning work of art. So CD Projekt Red, at this point, knows what they're doing, and everybody was excited to see what they would do with this Cyberpunk world. So behind the scenes, around the same time that they teased Cyberpunk, they had already been working on The Witcher 3, and that's a big game that took up a lot of their time and resources. The team behind Cyberpunk was much smaller than expected, with only a few hundred people working, but they were all passionate and excited about this new and interesting take on a futuristic cyber world. So as the years passed, progression went along as usual. We even got other trailers showing us more, and ultimately, raising the hate bar by 1 billion. Though we didn't really know when it was coming out, we knew it would be awesome. It had to be, right? But the small team kept pushing forward, and before you know it, we get the Keanu Reeves showcasing thing, or whatever you call it. Basically, it's the "you're breathtaking" thing. And more importantly, Keanu gave everybody a release date to look to, April 16, 2020. And you already know everybody on Earth was looking that day like the day I'll reach 1 million subscribers. Like gold. And they all waited, and waited, and waited, and finally, the date was right around the corner, but then CD Projekt Red took the release date and yeeted it out the window, effectively slapping half the population on Earth in the face. The team behind Cyberpunk was still working on a lot of aspects in the project, and there was no way they could have fulfilled that release date, so they had to push it back a bit. This really became a trying time for the guys working on Cyberpunk. The schedules became very tight and the tension was rising. Although they couldn't fulfill any of these release dates they had created, and they were forced to push it back several more times, until we got got December 10th, 2020, and this time, they were serious. The team was working around the clock, and the world outside was getting more and more excited. Now this is the point where things start to take a very interesting turn. It's hard to say if the game would have been perfect without these decisions made here, but it's these decisions that really hurt Cyberpunk. Last minute decisions. Taking a third-person shooter game and with a few days left on the deadline, changing it into an FPS. The city of flying cars and huge amount of awesome looking tech into a more empty and grounded city. Now, while I don't know for sure why they chose to change these aspects, let alone so close to the release date, but it was mostly these that really crumbled the game. Finally, Cyberpunk was tested and reviewed, but the way they did it was really shady. They were very selective about what platforms got reviewed. This raised an eyebrow. Then on top of this, they really pushed the game to be more of a next-gen console game. While it was definitely available for other consoles, it wasn't really made for them, if that makes sense. At that time, the next-gen console was very new. The audience definitely had a lot to say about Cyberpunk. I believe Donkey summed it up perfectly.
Playing Cyberpunk right now is like playing an early alpha version of a game that is years from completion.
Thanks, brother. Cyberpunk was an unfinished mess. The bugs were plentiful and made large parts of the game somewhere between completely unplayable or simply embarrassing. Now, although Cyberpunk made a lot of money, I mean, guys, it made a profit on its first day. And at the moment, Cyberpunk 2077 is the most expensive game in history. That's crazy. Many people refunded the game. It just wasn't finished or polished enough to play. I mean, the game practically wasn't even in a stage to polish. This was a really big letdown for so many people out there. The company apologized for it all shortly after the release, and though they've been trying to fix the game and add a possibly huge DLC, the damage has been done. People played, heard, and seen enough to know not to buy it. A major effect of this are the prices on the game, starting at around $60, I mean, geez, for real? To where it is now, at some places even going as low as $12. It's clearly evident that Cyberpunk has fallen. It's just the best way to put it, I guess. Elden Ring's prices, okay, stop the music, it's not the big moment yet, I was just bringing it up, started around $60 too, that was actually closer to $50, and right now, it's still about the same price. That's the difference between a massive game that was very expensive to make and eventually flopped, and a massive game that was very expensive to make, as well as fulfilling everything the audience expected and going light years beyond. Now once again, why? Cyberpunk 2077 was just not finished. Imagine a very small car towing a massive load right behind it. They're all taking it nice and slow at first, and it's working. Then they realize they don't have time, and they try to race that car as fast as it can go. The load is too big. They'll either have to set the date back again, or they'll just have to fail and come short. And it looks like CD Projekt Red chose the latter. Now, while we can point fingers here and there, the reason Cyberpunk was simply doomed from the beginning was the team. With Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and then right after that, Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC sucking up a lot of the resources CD Projekt Red had, Cyberpunk was just as big or even bigger, but was handed a much smaller team. Though that team made incredible progress, it simply wasn't enough. With hundreds of millions of dollars and countless hours of work invested into the game, it just wasn't enough. Now, even with the small team working on Cyberpunk, they could have pulled off something way better than what we got, if they just decided not to change a buttload of stuff 4 seconds from the release date. Now, if you want to look at a game that was expensive and had a lot of life put into it as well, look no further than Elden Ring. Elden Ring is the greatest game ever created. I've already given more of my life and my time to Elden Ring than the guys who made it. So, what do you think? It's sad, really, the whole Cyberpunk situation. Though they are working on a massive DLC that we're hoping will bring redemption to the game, we just don't know for sure. This video took way longer than I intended. I had gotten everything ready, and then I got the cold, which sucked. I'm okay now, my heartbeat is still going 14 times slower than usual, but I should make it. I hope. Next video is going to be about Stray. I'm super excited for it, and your cat is very excited for it, so don't let your cat down because it's going to be an awesome video. Remember to subscribe. I hope you have a great rest of the day, and remember, life is short. Play great games. About a week ago, I got a comment on one of my community posts recommending that I make a video on a game I enjoy. Now this stood out to me. I had never been asked to do something like this, and I was excited. And then about 3 seconds later, I realized I don't play many video games, which is weird for a guy who talks about them on YouTube, I know. But I was determined to make this video. Then, a few days later, I realized something else. I can make a video on my favorite video game, Elden Ring. Sounds obvious, I know, but it took me a week to think about that. So now